Because what you don't know about energy can kill you. Here's Alex Epstein.
Welcome to Power Hour. I'm Alex Epstein. So we've got so many huge issues going on right now in the world. And the one I want to focus on this week is the fuel and power crisis in Europe and around the world. We're seeing it in China, but I think Europe is the biggest case of it. And we're starting to see consequences in the US. We're seeing natural gas prices in particular go way up in Europe and have gone up significantly in the US after we were told for years, oh, natural gas is now going to be cheap forever. And I thought a really good perspective on this would be to actually bring on the CEO of a natural gas producer, because my basic view about this, and we'll see if he agrees, but I think he will agree, is that the world has never had more ability to produce energy, and particularly to produce fuel, and in particular, natural gas, where we've just had these amazing revolutions over the past decade or two. And yet we're having these shortages. And my view is whatever else is going on, the fundamental is that we are not allowed to drill for and transport oil and particularly natural gas to the best of our ability. And if we were, we would not have these problems and the world would be a much, much better place. But there's one thing hearing it from me, I thought it'd be really interesting to hear the perspective of somebody who's actually trying to produce this stuff for America and the world, who's having success, but is very limited by government. So I'm going to bring on the CEO of the largest natural gas producer in the US, EQT. His name is Toby Rice, and I've talked to him in advance, so he has a lot of really interesting insights on this issue. So Toby, welcome to Power Hour.
Hey, thanks, Alex.
All right, so just give us a quick introduction of you, your background, and how you became the CEO of EQT.
Yeah, it's been an unconventional path to becoming the CEO of EQT. My career started back in 2007. I started a company called Rice Energy, three brothers out of an apartment in Pittsburgh. And our goal was to help lead the United States gain energy independence, which was a huge feat.
Which is not back then considered very plausible at all.
It was considered almost impossible. That's how large of a goal this was. Through a lot of hard work, sleeping in trucks, taking what we would consider to be pretty large risk, we turned out to be very successful. In less than 10 years, we had grown from three brothers to over 570 employees. It was we had two public companies, an upstream business and a midstream business. We outperformed our peers by 90% during our time as a public company. We also built a great culture, and we think that was one of the reasons for why we had such great success. 2017, we had an opportunity to look at ways to create the next level of value creation for our shareholders. We had gone through the identification of an opportunity by doing the geology and mapping out the best areas to develop. We had gone through the land capture phase, where we've been able to go out and lease 250,000 acres. Present a lot of drilling opportunities for our company. We had gone through the technological, evolution and cutting our well costs and increasing the productivity of our wells. But, so we've gone through all those sort of key steps in value creation. And what we realized was that for us to get that next level of value creation for our stakeholders, it was going to be about, how we drill longer laterals. And so we're drilling around 8,000 foot laterals on average. If we combined with our offset operator, which was EQT at the time, that would be the key for us to drill 12,000 foot laterals. And the impact there is an increase in about 30% of your returns when you can drill 12,000 foot laterals versus 8,000.
So this is horizontal drilling, right?
Horizontal. That's correct. And this was happening in Appalachia, focusing on the Marcellus and Utica shales. So we made a decision back in 2017 to combine with EQT, and that combination created the nation's largest natural gas producer. Being big is not something that is what we shoot for, but anytime you can do anything bigger than Exxon in the oil and gas industry, it's something to be, just to recognize. We really set the company up for success. Unfortunately, it was about a year later, there were some issues at the company, and shareholders asked me to get back involved. After looking at the situation, realized that this company required a total overhaul of the way that they operate. And I launched a proxy contest with the Rice team, it was probably the worst 9 months of my life. Very stressful.
I had forgotten when I asked this question that you had a particularly dramatic story. So I forgot about that.
It was not a fun time, but it was absolutely necessary. And we took control of the board on July 10th, 2019. And for the last 2 years, it's been a pretty dramatic evolution of this business. What we've done has been pretty remarkable. We've attracted some of the best leadership in the business to work at EQT. We've cut our costs. We've cut over $700 million of annualized costs out of this business. Completely transformed the way that we operate, minimizing the environmental impact, and really generating some pretty healthy returns for our stakeholders. And it went from a very uncertain future to something that we're really excited about the future in front of us.
So let's talk about, obviously great to hear that you've had success with EQT, but let's talk about the success of the American natural gas industry more broadly, because just talk about, what's happened in the last 15 years in terms of what our output was 15 years ago versus today. Because it's just really shocking what's happened. And I think completely unexpected for almost everyone.
Yeah. And this is, to me, I think is one of the most impressive things about our country that really the general person has no idea. Think about, back in around 2000 is when we started to discover shales and that they could be a productive formation. The growth that we've had from shale has been tremendous. We were producing around 5 BCF a day of production from shale back in 2005. Today,
so BCF is billion cubic feet, right?
Yeah, and to put it in perspective, the United States today produces around 92 BCF. That's the entire U.S. gas market supply. And so
it's from 5 to over 90?
It went from 5 BCF in shale to over 70 BCF coming from shale. I mean, think about that. Think about how much energy supply that we've been able to create. That's brought a tremendous amount of abundance. It's made energy low cost, and it was a real big driving factor in bringing back energy independence to the United States. And also it also lowered emissions significantly as we evolved from burning coal to using more natural gas. But what it took to get there, Alex, is these shale reservoirs. I think a lot of people think we get out there with a drilling rig, we poke a hole in the ground, and oil and gas comes shooting up. That's not the case. We are drilling in reservoirs now that have less porosity than pavement. We're fracking these wells with jet engines. The technological innovation that this industry has brought, rivals NASA. There's no doubt in my mind. We can drill horizontal wells over 28,000 feet measured depth and hit a target the size of smaller than a basketball court. And doing all of this in a controlled, safe, environmentally friendly way is one of the biggest American industrial advancements that have been made in the last 100 years. And it's a tremendous opportunity for us that the United States has enjoyed to date.
So just one comment about the porosity so people get that. Like if you take shale rock, I've got, sometimes I'll visit companies and they'll give me a sample of the stuff. Like you have no idea, because you would think, maybe it's like a sponge, right? Where it just, stuff like gas can flow right through it. But he mentioned it's more like pavement or even less so. It just feels, it's just this slab of rock and you just think nothing, it's just rock. Nothing could ever come out of this. And yet ingenuity makes so that oil and natural gas somehow come out of this cheaply enough where it's worth doing.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. You drill these wells that will, these wells we're producing now will produce around, call anywhere from 20,000 units of gas in a day. But you drill these wells into the shale horizontally and nothing happens. We don't unlock these reservoirs until we go out and do a hydraulic fracture operation. And, we're putting, water and sand and high pressure to create these fissures that will enable gas to flow. And like I said, it's been a tremendous evolution from the horizontal drilling to the way that we complete these wells and doing it in an environmentally responsible way. It really is remarkable.
So let's now talk about something that's not remarkable, because when we've seen this over the past few years, there's been an expectation that, okay, well, it's going to continue like this. And one, you mentioned the increased quantity, but just as notable and very related is the decreased price. So we've had dramatically lower natural gas prices. That contributes, all things being equal, to lower cost electricity, certainly lower cost heating for homes, lower cost heating for industry, a lot of industry locating to the US because of newly low prices. And there was a certain kind of expectation that, well, this is going to continue indefinitely, like natural gas prices are going to be low indefinitely. Now, one counter to that is historically natural gas prices are very volatile, much more so than, say, coal prices. But then you could also say, well, we have a technology now and a resource base now where we can expect it to be low. And I think that was reasonable, except for the phenomenon of restriction of drilling and restriction of transportation. That's where I saw the volatility, not so much the issues that used to cause volatility. So with that in mind, what has been happening in the US and Europe in terms of prices over the past year, and particularly in recent months?
Yeah, so currently right now, we are dealing with an extreme price shock. And, as an energy executive, we do not like seeing the extreme prices. But I think, and so what you're seeing, what this is translated to from a pricing perspective, in 2020, gas prices in the US measured by, Henry Hub gas price averaged around $2.10. And so in Europe right now, LNG prices are around $30. In Asia this past weekend, LNG prices spiked to $100. This is, and what this has done is this has caused pricing in the United States to rise to over $5 an MCF. And for Cal 22, the average price is around $4.40. Significant increase in gas prices. Now, why has this happened? I think you look at some of the things that Europe has done. One of the ways that they used to get their energy was from, like, UK was an example. They used to drill in the North Sea, and the wells that they would drill in the North Sea were actually sort of like their storage. Well, they stopped developing in the North Sea, and so now they're completely dependent on natural gas imports from LNG, as well as all their existing energy grids that they have, which have made a significant move, increasing in the percentage of power that's generated from wind and solar. And so right now, because of an extreme weather event this summer, we had a very warm summer. They find themselves in a situation where gas storage in Europe is almost 20% below the 5-year average. And what you're seeing now is a little bit of a panic to acquire the energy, because if people don't have energy, the consequences are dire. And so people are trying to stock up so that that they can withstand a cold winter. At the end of the day, you look at this and all of this could have been prevented. And I think that the United States, we can do more for the world and give the world the energy, reliability that they need. Because that supply that we've had, what we're running up to right now is, we've done everything we could to grow our supplies to address these needs. I mean, we really want to be a solution here. Unfortunately, we're just out of infrastructure. And so we have the biggest gas resource in the world here in Appalachia. And EQT could do so much more, but without the infrastructure, without the infrastructure, there's not much we can do to touch these people. And what's really ironic, Alex, is I grew up in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is one of the few places, it's the only place in the United States that imports natural gas, and they have an LNG import facility in Everett, Massachusetts. Those people are paying exposed to international LNG prices, so they're paying over $25 for their product, where 300 miles away is natural gas from the largest shale basin in the world. But we're not able to build pipelines to get it there. And so instead they're getting their gas from places like Russia and from, Trinidad and Tobago, which is over 2,500 miles away. And these are some of the really odd things that are happening in energy and it's, can all be solved with an investment in pipeline infrastructure and LNG export facilities.
So talk about your company in particular, because people might think, oh, well, we're producing so much shale gas now, maybe we're topped out. But my impression is there's almost unlimited amounts that we could be doing to supply both the US and the world.
Yeah, I mean, right now, the amount of inventory that we have in the US is really just dependent on the price that we receive. It's tough to find, we don't have we have a very large inventory that can be economically produced at a $1.50 to $2 gas price. But when you get to $3, $3.50, $4, the amount of inventory that can actually be developed and generate a decent return for our shareholders, multiplies almost exponentially. Mm-hmm. So if we said, if gas prices were long-term were $4.50, which, by the way, is the average price of gas over the last 20 years, there is no concern that we would be able to power the world with American domestic natural gas, and really insulate, energy demand from, extreme price shocks. But we need the tools to be able to do that, and that's pipelines and LNG export facilities.
So this might be a surprise to some people because, of course, we have these enormous infrastructure proposals. And so everyone talks about infrastructure and we care about infrastructure. We'll talk about the proposals in a minute, but what's been happening to pipeline infrastructure and the permission to build it over the past 15 years as we have increased our ability to drill for it and also to export it using LNG?
Yeah, pipeline infrastructure in the US, it's incredibly difficult. You can see just recently, a few days ago, canceling the Penn East pipeline project that was going to take gas from northeastern Pennsylvania down to New Jersey. There was Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which was a pipeline from southwestern Pennsylvania taking gas into Virginia, Carolinas. That was a B and a half of pipeline capacity canceled. You've got Constitution, which would take gas from northeast to New York, canceled. And the one pipeline that's coming out of Appalachia that's still going is MVP, Mountain Valley Pipeline, over 95% complete. And but the challenges from that pipeline infrastructure have been tremendous. That was a project that was originally slated to cost around $3 billion. They're projected to be spending over $6 billion to complete that pipeline. You're in a situation today where I think it's very hard pressed for companies to be incentivized to go out and develop this large scale infrastructure that this country needs, this world needs, because of the regulatory uncertainty and just the pressure we get from anti fossil fuel, keep it in the ground groups that are out there.
So what's been the rationale of all of these restrictions on pipeline building? And I guess one point that people should get is, natural gas is amazing, but it does have the challenge of it is a gas. So it's not super easy to, it's harder to move around than oil. It has less ability to, if, you restrict an oil pipeline, that's terrible, but you can move it around via train. You can move it around via truck. It's not as safe, more likely to have accidents. It's more expensive, but you can still do it. Coal, kind of similar. You can more easily move it overseas. Natural gas is amazing. It's clean burning. You have a huge amount of it, et cetera, but it is a gas. So you really, really need pipelines to move natural gas. So with that in mind, what have been the main arguments that these groups are using to restrict these gas pipelines?
Well, I think that the one concern is just the environmental impact. But, I think the good news about the oil and gas industry is our impact to the environment is very well known from, hydraulic fracturing that has been thoroughly vetted, scrutinized, and EPA came out with a report under Obama that said hydraulic fracturing is safe. There's no impact to drinking water, and that was the first tool that environmentalists were looking at to mitigate the production of hydrocarbons. They've just moved on to the next tool, which is pipelines. And what's really unfortunate is when you look at what happened with the pipeline for oil when Biden got in, canceling that, but that oil is still going to move. It's just going to be moving through people's towns, on trains and trucks, which is not as safe as what you can get with a pipeline. At the end of the day, I think people are being pretty blunt about it. Now it's not, going after the tools. It's really clear that people are looking just to, stop the use of fossil fuels. But I think these types of situations that are out there just remind people that this is the way this world has been built. This has been over 150 years of reliance on this energy source because it is the most abundant, it's the cheapest, and it's the most reliable form of energy. And people's lives depend on this. And I think the reason I'm in this industry, Alex, is because I could have done a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, I totally agree with your book, The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. When I getting back involved with energy and taking this role at EQT, for me was about making an impact on the world. And this is where we share this with the environmentalists. I think we all want to make the world a better place. So we agree on that. How we do it is a little bit different. I recognize that energy consumption is the driving factor behind human progress and human flourishing. And my role in this world is to help promote energy consumption and drive human progress around the world. That means hydraulic fracturing. That means shale development. That means building pipelines. That means, feeding LNG facilities that will feed the world with the energy that they need to live productive, valuable lives.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's, particularly because, you mentioned you had a lot of success with your original business. It's not like you had a financial need to run another gas company. And for people who don't know, not that I know this firsthand, but it's not like an easy job to do in any way, including the different kinds of attacks that you get. So I think people have this idea that like oil and gas executives are doing this because it's just this amazing paycheck and you just get to be on top of the world. Like most of the people I know could have retired long ago, but they choose not to because they love the work. And also they really have this conviction that it's crucial to the world now more than ever.
100%. Alex, I pay myself $1 a year. We do this. We really do believe in the higher purpose. So much in ESG over the past 2 years has been focused on the environmental side, and we're now able to showcase all the great work that we're doing there. Producing energy here domestically in the United States, we're doing it at 1/10 of the emissions intensity that you'd get from places internationally like China or Russia. So if you're going to produce energy, do it here. But the part that we should really need to be talking about is the S, the social. The good work that we're doing on the world, and you're a big champion for us by talking about the pros of energy use. And I think if people really understood energy, I think they would look and see that we can have both things. We can have a cleaner environment and expand our use of energy to drive human progress in the world. United States is a great case study of that. Leveraging natural gas, we increased our share of electricity generation by natural gas by over 20%, while reducing our emissions as a country by 25% over the last 10 years. So this isn't a situation where I think you have to pick one side or the other. We can do both, but we need to have a realistic perspective and awareness that we've done things. We've proven it here in the United States that we can do both. And I think that's something that we hope, we can champion, just people recognizing that.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a different perspective. If you talk about doing both, I'm on record. I'm not asking you to agree because for many reasons, but I'm in a different position. I very much oppose the current ESG movement, not because I'm against a good environment or a good society, but because I think it's based on conceptions of those that I disagree with. And let's focus on environment. So you say that everyone can unite around it, like us and the environmentalists. Well, I think it depends what category of environmentalists, because there's a question when you're talking about environment: is our goal a livable environment for humans, or is it an unimpacted environment. And I think much of modern environmentalism is really about an unimpacted environment. And sometimes people want both. And really what natural gas and other things are doing is it's making the world more livable. And so part of that is, yeah, you want to be as clean burning as you can be. You want to generate as few negative side effects as you can. But the key thing is we actually need to produce a lot of stuff to have a livable environment. Nature is not a livable environment for 1 billion people, let alone 8 billion people. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing that reality where if you cannot produce enough energy for the winter, people are going to freeze to death. You know, you've seen these stories like in Great Britain, people like just spending all day in the library, spending all day on a bus, burning old books. Literally, this happens now. I mean, because they cannot afford to heat their homes. I mean, people being found in their homes frozen solid like a block of ice. All this has happened just in the UK, not even this year. I mean, a livable environment requires massive amounts of production, which means massive amounts of energy. So my perspective is like, yeah, I care about environment, but in a holistic sense, not just, oh, let's not contaminate it, but let's produce a really good environment. Let me ask from this perspective, ESG. So how is the ESG, even if you think, okay, its aims are more noble than I think they are, how is it affecting your ability to transport natural gas? Because from what I've seen, they're not very enthusiastic about pipeline infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, the ESG movement, you've seen capital pull away from investing in energy, whether that's investing in upstream businesses or midstream infrastructure projects. So it's definitely made things a lot more challenging for companies to raise capital to continue to do the great work that we do. Fortunately, this is the most innovative industry in the world, and we've been able just over this last year to make significant strides, gain significant efficiencies. So fortunately, this industry is able to do more with less. You know, for us at EQT, that was pulling $700 million of annualized costs out of our business. Guess what? Other people in industry have made, you know, significant strides there as well. That's what's allowed us to continue to generate profits even at lower gas prices. But you know, it's definitely made it a lot more challenging to find investors for large projects. The one thing I would say about ESG is, you know, when we think about energy, you know, what is the future of energy? And I do think that ESG has brought some clarity to what the future of energy is. And I think the future of energy is going to be the energy source that is the most reliable, the cheapest, and the greenest. And when you look at energy through that lens, you know, natural gas is the clear winner. But you know, at EQT, we think about how can we make our business, the energy that we produce, aligned with the energy of the future. How can we be greener? How can we be cheaper? How can we become more reliable? And for us, from the green side of things, this is all about eliminating our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. But that's where we draw the line. And we're going to be net zero by 2025. So think about this: America's largest natural gas producer is going to be net zero in less than 3.5 years. But you know, going over into scope 3, which is what happens to the product with our customers, you know, this is something that, you know, we are not going to be focusing on pushing down scope 3, because we realize that the use of our product is life-giving and the key to human progress, and we want to champion that and not shy away from that. But scope 1 and 2, that's all about doing things, you know, less pollution, and fortunately, you know, we've got a really great starting point here, being one of the top most efficient, cleanest operators in the US.
Okay, well, if you're so scope 1 and scope 2, like this is the thing. So the scope, these are kind of insider terminology, but the key thing is, so I mean, my view of ESG, again, I'm not going to ask you to respond to it because you've got shareholders and this kind of thing. So I'm just going to say what I think, and listeners can think. But like, if you look at the actual emissions from using oil, for example, or using natural gas, we'll take it. So there's what's involved, the emissions involved in producing the stuff, and then in consuming the stuff. And what the ESG movement has said is, okay, let's just start off with what's involved in producing it, which is the scope 1 and scope 2. Like, let's be cleaner there. We can control you directly there. And that's what we're going to focus on. But the point that gets brought up, so for instance, just to take a different company, there are other companies that'll say like, okay, we're injecting CO2 into the ground to develop our oil, like Occidental or Oxy has been very prominent in this. But then the response is going to be, well, okay, but you're doing that in order so that more people can burn fossil fuels. So if you put CO2 into the ground for enhanced oil recovery, right, what's going to happen is you are going to produce more oil. And so that's going to be, so my analogy to this, which is, I think, pretty funny, is it's like saying, okay, we're going to sell even more cigarettes, but nobody at our company is going to smoke. Like that's the view. It's like, oh, CO emissions are like smoking. And so it's like, oh yeah, well, RJ Reynolds, we're not going to have any smokers at RJ Reynolds, but we're going to sell even more cigarettes via these efficient things. So I would say I'm glad that you're not, I mean, scope 3 is like, that's where the real battle is. So I'm glad you're not conceding that, but I think that is the core battle. Let me switch topics. I want to hear from you. How does it feel to be in this position where, like, that there's all of this damage that's happening right now in the US and particularly in Europe, and we know it's going to get far worse because it's winter, and despite what everyone says, cold is far more dangerous than heat in the world. And so you're talking about people freezing to death, you're talking about factories shutting down, that's already happening, talking about all these crises. I mean, how does it feel to know that you could prevent that if we were allowed to build infrastructure, and yet you can't do it because we're not allowed to build infrastructure?
Yeah, it feels terrible, Alex. Because we know what this industry can do. If we were allowed to have that type of infrastructure, all of these hardships that people are going through right now, not even the deaths are terrible, but so many more struggles being created from unexpectedly high energy bills. So it's really disappointing because we know that we've got the tools to be able to make it happen. I mean, this industry right now has come through a pretty big, I'd say not a recession, but we pulled back significantly. This industry is running 500 rigs right now, compared to the 2,000 rigs we were running at a peak a while back. This industry has so much more potential to go beyond what we've done with bringing energy independence to the United States, and go beyond that and bring energy independence and energy security to other people of the world. And it's been the application of, it started with hydraulic fracturing and shales and the exploration and discovery there. And now the next wave of this industry is going to be on LNG facilities and pipeline infrastructure that will connect the supply, like the Marcellus Shale in the Northeast, to these LNG facilities so that we can share the benefits of natural gas with the world. So, I mean, that's probably the thing that makes that's the toughest to consider, because it's not like we're sitting here and saying, how could we prevent this? What's the solution? We need to bet on innovation, or we need to bet on this new technology, let this develop. No, the answer is right here. It's what we've done in the United States, and we've got so much more potential to make an even bigger impact on the world. And that's the really challenging part, because we know what to do. We're just not able, we're not being able to be unleashed to help on a world stage.
So let's now just connect this to what's happening now, because we're recording this on October 4th. Infrastructure is one of the words of the day. We're talking about $1 billion infrastructure, and then a billion, I wish. Maybe I don't wish, but like $1 trillion infrastructure, and then a 3.5 trillion, what they call human infrastructure thing. And this is all being debated. How much attention, if any, is this issue of pipelines getting? Like, is there any provision in this infrastructure to have more pipeline, or is there hostility toward pipeline?
Yeah, certainly not clearly spelled out how much is going to be going for midstream pipeline infrastructure servicing the upstream business. There's a lot of talk on hydrogen, which is neat, because hydrogen is typically used from natural gas. So you would think that common sense, if people want to bet on the hydrogen economy, you're going to need to make sure you build the infrastructure to make a robust, natural gas industry to support that. But the things that we see in some of these policies here is, we just want to see a fair a fair market and a connected market. I think you look at the basis differentials all across the country as examples of how connected is this market here in the United States. And, as an example up here in Appalachia, basis differentials are anywhere from 75 cents to $1.20, currently at 90 cents today.
So just explain what a basis differential is.
That's the discount. That's the price. That's the discount to the Henry Hub price. So when we talk about NYMEX price of currently over $5, we're not getting $5 up here in Appalachia. We're getting $5 minus the differential. And so that differential should be, around 45 to 50 cents. The reason it's higher than that is just a sign that there's not enough infrastructure built up here. And so I think you can see that across all different parts of the country as a sign that clearly we need to have more infrastructure built in the United States. And then the other part is just from a fair market, some of the other policies that just give us some concern, prioritizing other sources of energy, namely renewable, is one of the things that would cause, the demand for, reliable, clean burning natural gas to not be able to have as big of an impact as it should.
Yeah, it's really, just think about infrastructure. And I should add, we're talking about spending our money on infrastructure, but when you guys are building infrastructure, this is stuff that you want to finance, right? This is not like, oh, you're going to tax us $1 trillion, which is, by the way, people don't know that's $7,700 a household. Like, to pay for this is, you want to just be free to build the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And nobody subsidized the oil and gas industry. I mean, this was something that was this growth that we've seen in the United States, going from 5 BCF of shale gas production to over 70 BCF a day of shale gas production today, in a 90 BCF a day U.S. supply. That was financed through, private investments and didn't require government subsidies. The government did help in doing some research early on, but the reason for our success in this industry has been the entrepreneurial mindset, the tremendous, technological innovators that we still have today in this industry that have driven the success. So it's really an independent industry that doesn't require the government to help. But, what we would like is to have more help from the government on putting in this infrastructure. So, we're not asking for we're not asking for the checkbook to help us become more successful. We're not asking for the pen for legislators to change bills. We're looking for leaders to use their microphone and use their platform to look at all the great work that we've done in this industry, changing the world, giving energy independence in the United States, and just use that microphone to celebrate those things so that we continue to do more. Because, Alex, I mean, look at what's going on in Europe and Asia right now. And all of these are just a sign that the United States is not doing enough to meet the world needs.
Yeah, I mean, nor we should say Europe. I mean, Europe has a lot of these pressures much worse. So they have enormous potential to do shale oil and shale gas there. That's being suppressed there. And, one thing we should mention with the renewables, or I don't call them renewables, I call them unreliables, but let's just say with solar and wind, is that the more you use that, the more dependent you are on the flexibility of natural gas. One of the nice things about natural gas is it has this incredible ability to cycle up and down as needed. So what's really scary to me is you have this insistence on wind and solar, which I think itself is problematic, but then a non-recognition that you absolutely need rock solid natural gas availability. And I think we saw that in Texas, like not enough concern for that. And we're seeing it other places. Like if you're dealing with something as difficult to deal with as natural gas in terms of it needs transportation and needs huge transportation ability, like you are really killing people if you're saying we want wind and solar and we're going to also restrict natural gas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we just come back to like energy of the future, it's cheap, reliable, and green. And I think a lot of talk and emphasis has been put on how how much solar and wind has come down the cost curve, but it's not the same product because of the intermittency of wind and solar. Sunshine is free, but solar is not. And when we look at the cost, I tell people the cost comparison, because we get this quoted a lot. Solar and wind are as cheap as natural gas, and I just say, listen, if you think it's the cheapest, let me just sell you this car. You want to buy a car. Both cars are the same price. One car will run 24/7. Whenever you want to drive somewhere, you can drive. The other car is only going to drive when the sun's out or the wind's blowing. Which car are you going to buy? It's the same cost. And now, and the proposition now is, well, if we can build batteries and do energy storage, which take the cost of that car 4 times the expense. Now the price tag is 4 times larger than the traditional car. It's obvious that that's what it would take to make a comparable product. And I mean, forget about the supply chain that's involved with batteries. So one of the really neat things about natural gas here is not only is it the greenest, most reliable, and cheapest, it's also the product that's made in the USA, and all the benefits that we get from that as well.
I like the car analogy. And just one thing to think about with the car analogy is you wouldn't even be comfortable buying 3 of those cars, right? In terms of reliability, like you wouldn't be comfortable that you're going to get to where you need to go. And even if you could map them to, like, one somehow is going to use California sunshine and one is going to use Midwest and one is going to use Appalachia, like still you wouldn't, like even 3 of them would. And that's what actually happens. And so in practice, as I mentioned, like what all these things totally rely on is natural gas, and like the ability to rapidly put natural gas up and down. And you saw this in Texas when the wind died down, when it got cold. And this was before any turbines froze. There's too much focus on turbines freezing. But even before that happened, just wind doesn't blow much usually when it's really cold. And you saw this massive increase in the need for natural gas. And people complained and got upset because natural gas only increased by 400% during that situation. And there were failures. They wanted to do more, but that just shows how reliant that system is on natural gas, because they know that the wind and solar can almost always go near zero. And the defense, which I found crazy, but the defense of this was, oh, well, we knew that wind and solar wouldn't work very well in this situation. But then you're saying, oh, let's rely on it and let's not have like incredible rock solid natural gas supply. So my view is unfortunately, there's not a sincere interest in energy. Some of it is ignorance, but I think among the thought leaders, it's hostility toward energy for various reasons. But it's really scary to see. So it's great that you're speaking up. Any final messages for the public or for our elected officials who are currently talking about infrastructure, and yet, in my view, not just, they don't need to pay for anything, they're not liberating the most important form of infrastructure, which is energy infrastructure.
Yeah, I think one thing I'd want to just make sure I'll get out there is, listen, I'm not against solar and wind. I think that they are a tool in the toolbox that we should use to make up a piece of our grid. But our grid needs to be balanced. We need to balance, cost, reliable, and green, and moving in one way or the other. All green, it's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be reliable. And so there does need to be a balance. And I think that's really, really important for people to keep in mind, because in deploying the practical solutions, I mean, one of the really interesting things, Alex, that I think is a really big opportunity in front of us today, is if we can expand gas production in the United States by 20 BCF a day, which you say, well, that sounds like a lot. It is, but when you compare it to the fact that we've grown gas supply in shale by over 65 BCF a day in the last 15 years, 20 BCF a day is relatively simple for us to be able to do that. If we can do that, then the prize there obviously is going to be able to alleviate these extreme situations that the world is dealing with today. And also from an environmental perspective, that would eliminate over 370 million tons of CO2 emissions per year, if you just assume that the natural gas we put into the market is going to be retiring coal. 370 million tons, just to make that relative to you, that's about the emissions from France. 370 million tons would be over 9 times the total amount of carbon capture projects that are taking place in the world today. So, that's a really huge opportunity. And, for policymakers that are listening, if you want to be a leader on the world stage, lead by example. And we can certainly continue to add, solar and wind, while keeping in mind the reliability that we need in our grid. But you really want to be a leader, leverage your resources, leverage the American innovation ingenuity, leverage, this workforce that we have that's running sort of at half speed, and share the benefits with an American-made product on the world. That I think is we have a really tremendous opportunity to lead here. And all we're saying that we need to unleash U.S. shale is pipeline infrastructure and LNG facilities. And with that, I think we can make a pretty big push to meeting the energy demands of the world while respecting the environmental concerns that some people have as well.
All right. Well, and I just want to emphasize, it's again permission to build this stuff. It's not again subsidies or handouts and that. And I would just say, I'm totally enthusiastic about expanding this stuff, where we may differ and people can read Fossil Future and you can read Fossil Future to see if you agree with me. Is just, I think the world needs vastly more energy. So I don't see it as, we should be replacing coal. I see it as only 1.5 billion people in the world use even a third as much electricity as the average American. Over 3 billion people use the same amount of electricity per person or less than an American refrigerator, and 3 billion people are in between. So my view is the world needs more energy. Really grateful to the American natural gas industry for innovating in this space, and grateful to you for coming on. I think it's going to be really inspiring to people to hear what's possible. And I think it's also going to be really upsetting to people to hear what's being restrained. So hopefully we can make an impact. And thanks again for joining me, Toby.
Hey, thanks, Alex.
All right. Thanks again to Toby Rice for joining me. So I thought it was really great to have the CEO's perspective on sort of what's happening in the world, what can be done, what needs to be done, and just how tragic it is that we have this incredible ability and it's being restricted. So I hope you enjoyed that. As you saw, there were different points of agreement and disagreement. So definitely, ESG people don't attribute all of my views to him, don't attribute all of his views to me. But I think the core thing he's expressing is crucially important. And so I was really glad to get him on. If you want some of my views on ESG, check out energytalkingpoints.com. I talk a bit about the ESG. If you just search ESG there, you'll see that. And then I also have my positive alternative to ESG, which I call LCV, long-term value creation. All right. Speaking of that, make sure to check out energytalkingpoints.com and get on my mailing list. As always, if you have any questions, comments, love mail, or hate mail, email me at alex@alexepstein.com. And once again, energytalkingpoints.com, you can get on my newsletter. You can also get on that at alexepsteinlist.com. I'm posting a lot still on Twitter, so make sure to follow me there at twitter.com/alexepstein. And if you want to support our research and development and promotional efforts, which are going to continue to be really big as Fossil Future launches, as we have these huge domestic issues and international issues in October, November. November is the big UN climate conference. You can become an accelerator at industrialprogress.com/accelerate. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll be back in 2 weeks, probably with another great guest. It'll either be me or a great guest. It won't be a mediocre guest. I can promise you that. Until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been Power Hour.
Power Hour. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of energy. Power Hour. The antidote to shallow thinking about energy issues.